A lot of the time in trigonometric word problems, trigonometry word problems, you'll encounter words like angle of elevation and angle of depression. These refer to specific ways that you need to draw the picture of the situation. Because remember, any trigonometry problem is going to involve a right triangle in some way. And so sometimes the drawing will be made for you, sometimes the diagram will already be there, but sometimes you'll have to draw it yourself. And in some of those cases, you might get these phrases, this angle of elevation and angle of depression. Now they mean two different things, but in a way, they mean exactly what they say they do. An angle of elevation means, actually both of these indicate the starting point of staring straight ahead. So when you stare straight ahead, and then you have to elevate your gaze, if you have to look up to point at, say, the top of a ceiling, or the top of a tree, or a building, or something like that, that angle that we go through to go from the horizontal to that elevated viewpoint, that's the angle of elevation. Angle of elevation. If you have to pitch up in order to point at the top of something, if you're just pointing at the top of a tree, you have to move your arm up to point it at that. That's an angle of elevation. If you think of it as an elevator, usually if you're in an elevator, you're going up. I mean, you could go down in an elevator, but usually you're thinking of it going up. Angle of depression, then, is just the other way around. If we are standing at, say, the top of a tower, or something along those lines, and we need to look at something lower than us, we have to point down. We have to move from the horizontal to some angle downward. And so that motion there, of pitching your gaze down, that's an angle of depression. Angle of depression. Now, the way that I remember this is that when you feel depressed, you feel sad, you feel down, you're in a down mood. And so depression is down, elevation is up. Think of your own way to remember that, though, because it's important to remember what the difference is. So now we have a couple examples of word problems involving these terms. First, a wheelchair ramp is to be installed to reach a height of 30 inches. The angle of elevation cannot exceed 15 degrees. How long will the ramp be? So the first part of this, the important first part of this, is we need to make a picture. Make a picture, make a picture, make a picture. Always make a picture. We have a wheelchair ramp that's to be installed so it reaches a height of 30 inches. We're going to be making a right triangle of some kind. And the height of this ramp, this is the ramp here. Try to draw a wheelchair. So the height of the ramp is 30 inches. It needs to reach a height of 30 inches. I don't know how long this distance is. I also don't know how long that distance is. But I do know that the angle of elevation, so the angle going up, is 30 degrees, or 15 degrees rather. So the angle of elevation is always from the horizontal. Same thing for the angle of depression. From the horizontal and going up. So that angle is 15 degrees. And I want to know how long will the ramp be. So I need to know how long is that ramp. So I know that I have a right triangle. I have the opposite side, the side opposite that angle. This, remember what you talked about in class. Opposite the angle there. And then this, of course, is the hypotenuse. So we have the opposite side. We have the hypotenuse. Which trigonometric ratio involves the opposite side and the hypotenuse? be the sine. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Remember, so, ka, toa. Anyway, the sine of that angle, sine of 15 degrees over 1 is equal to the opposite side, 30, over the hypotenuse, x. Cross multiply, and I get that x times the sine of 15 rather, 15 degrees, is equal to 30, which means x is equal to 30 divided by the sine of 15. So now you can just type that into your calculator, 30 divided by the sine of 15. Remember to make sure your calculator is in degree mode, and we get 115.9, roughly. And that's in inches. 115.9 inches. It's a little bit more than 9.5 feet. So in order for this ramp to reach 30 inches, which is a little short of 3 feet, it's actually going to need to be 9.5 feet long. So it's a long ramp, but that's how we would find it, 115.9 inches. Remember, angle of elevation is that pitching upward motion. One more example. An airplane cruising at 30,000 feet starts its descent to an airport 240,000 feet away. That's about 45 miles. We're talking about a pretty big distance. What is its angle of depression? Another term for angle of depression, by the way, is angle of declination. Declination. You might see that term used, but more often than not, it'll be angle of depression. We have to be a little bit careful about how we set up this picture. Angle of depression means we would have a picture like this. So it makes sense for us to make a picture, and if this is our airplane, I'm not good at drawing pictures, as you can tell, and this is the runway for the airport. Try to draw a little picture. Yeah, anyway, you get the idea. This is the picture that we would probably draw if we're talking about an angle of depression, which is what we don't know here. But what's important to remember is that, how to label the sides, in other words. Because it might actually be more convenient for us to think of this triangle. Because we know that this height, the angle, or the height of the airplane is 30,000. And we know that the distance away is 240,000. And an important thing to observe is that an angle of depression from up in the air is the same as an angle of elevation from down on the ground. This angle here is the same as this angle down here. So I could just take that angle and use that as my unknown. Alternatively, I could just realize that this, of course, is the same length as this, 240,000. And this is the same length as that, so 30,000. And I'll get my picture that way. As long as you're careful to label the sides with the right way, in the right way, it doesn't actually matter how you draw your picture. It's just, you gotta be very careful about how you label your sides. The height of the airplane, and it doesn't matter if you measure it over here, is 30,000 feet. And the distance away, it doesn't matter if you measure it up here or down here, is 240,000. The point is, I need that angle. And because I know the opposite side is equal to what? Opposite over adjacent. 30,000 divided by 240,000. So that gives me that the tangent of x is equal to whatever 30,000 divided by 240,000 is. 30,000 divided by 240,000 is 0.125, or 1/8. So now I need to figure out what angle has a tangent of 0.125. And to find the missing angle, I need to use the opposite of the tangent. I need to use the inverse tangent. Inverse tangent of 0.125. Just checking my math here to make sure that that is, yeah. So inverse tangent then of 0.125 gives me 7.125. So about 7.1 degrees. The angle of depression right there is 7.1 degrees. So just remember this, angle of elevation is the angle you have to go, angle that you have to move your hand up in order to point up at something. Angle of depression is the angle that you have to go through to point down at something. Elevation is up, depression is down. Draw your picture, make sure you label the sides appropriately, and then you can solve from there.